send you the host.
Can I start, Deborah? Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here today with us. I hope everyone is healthy and safe. I am Cynthia Alcantara. I am a marketing manager for the automotive industry, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Brains networking group. If you're not familiar with us, we are a not-for-profit community created in February 2017 with the purpose of gather Brazilians who moved to Canada to study or to work in the areas of marketing, advertising, communications, design, and analytics. Our goal is to guide and support the career of our members to provide a smooth transition between Brazilian and Canada environments, in addition to promote networking and experience exchange. Our community today has more than 500 people, and we interact daily in one of our social medias. I would like to say thank you to Deborah Fontana and Tatiana Mendes for putting this event together. And also, of course, to our speaker, Shannon Branwell. Feel free to jump into the chat and post your questions. And I will kick over to Shannon for her to introduce herself. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you to yourself and to Deborah for having me this evening. And hello to everyone that is joining us. Like you said, my name is Shannon Branwell. I am a professor and program coordinator to our special event planning program at Centennial College. And so I've been teaching in event planning for close to almost 7 years, I guess. Prior to my time at Centennial, I was heavily involved in the event industry here in Canada, specifically in Toronto and across Ontario. I owned a business in the event industry, specifically in a very niche area of the industry, focusing on health and safety and crisis planning for mass live productions. So specifically, I focused my work on concerts, sporting events, and music festivals. But now that I've taken more of a full-time educator role, a lot of my event experiences nowadays are in volunteer work and not-for-profit, particularly with a heart for volunteering, dealing with those a little bit less fortunate, raising funds for rescue animals, and also helping out with migrant communities that are immigrating to Canada. So that's a little bit about me, and thank you for having me today.
I was on mute. Okay, so being an event planner for large-scale events, as you said, how did you feel when the industry was hit so hard last year, almost decimated and shut down overnight? I'll talk about myself. I not lost my job, but we got almost 4 major events canceled in my company, and I was put in temporary layoff because of that. So it was hard for everybody, right? But how was it for you and your students?
You're right, absolutely very difficult for everybody. I was watching kind of what was going on globally speaking as early as probably late December 2019, early January. And John Hopkins has this great big world map, and they were tracking where the different cases were and how fast it was spreading. And so I was in contact with my colleagues in other countries. At the time, I was planning a trip to Indonesia to study events with some of my students. And so we were talking to a lot of our colleagues in Asia and realizing like, this is pretty serious. And so when it finally hit here in Toronto, I guess, middle of March 2020, truth be told, like a lot of feelings, lots of different feelings. And I mean, overall, I would say sad. I mean, sad for everybody, be it our, those in the industry or even everybody who attends events, because events are just so monumental to, the cohesion of society, that social aspect of society. It's good for, your soul and your mental health. It's good for the economy. And so it was really sad to see like a busy city like Toronto all of a sudden just go quiet overnight. And that's a little bit scary sometimes if you think about it. I had some worries. I mean, I had a lot of worries and fears for friends of mine that were still in industry and the businesses that they own. Reflecting back on myself and, what would I have done if I had still owned my business during this time? But at the same time, I knew that my colleagues, my friends, and everybody in the industry had already been working on experimenting with hybrid events and virtual events. So I was also very hopeful. I knew that, it was only a matter of a few weeks before we get back up on our feet and find a new way to connect again.
Yeah, that I was amazed at how fast we were able to evolve and adapt. It was incredible, right? So become virtual also overnight. We had to adapt and learn so quickly about new technologies that was available for us to use, and new experience and vendors, formats, etc. And also I was a little bit overwhelmed because then when I was back to work, my boss, we need to go virtual, we need to do so many trainings. And I think everybody's a little bit overwhelmed how much fast we were, but at the same time was a lot to take, right? So what was your experience creating virtual events through the pandemic? What worked, what didn't work? What lessons did you take from it?
I was very fortunate. I had dabbled in virtual and hybrid events back in 2018, 2019. I actually had a group of students who were working with me on a virtual/hybrid virtual reality event. And so we had a satellite location in Toronto and a satellite location at Lethbridge College in Alberta. And we also had our speakers joining us from Germany and the UK. And so it was really neat to have had that experience and know that that experience works. But at the same time, that was one platform. And so like yourself and many others in the industry, you jumped on every seminar you could all of a sudden, and you were learning about every platform there was. And there are so many platforms. And I would say, maybe even every week, a new platform would pop up as you're like, oh, do I need to go learn about that now? So there was a lot of that going on. But I was really appreciative and somewhat very proud of our industry because there was such a sense of community and collaboration. Sometimes you can always feel like, oh, that's the competitor over there, and I'm trying not to share or I'm trying not to be involved. But all of a sudden, that was all gone, and people were so happy to share and so happy to support each other in sharing that knowledge, in supporting each other's events, in sharing and marketing each other's events as well. And so that was really, really good. In terms of lessons learned, so many lessons learned. I don't know that we have the time today to cover all of them. I would say the biggest takeaway is that it's still about the one thing that makes events, and that's the connection. If there is no connection that people feel when they attend your event, regardless if it's in person or online, then it just doesn't work, right? People need to feel like they are heard. They want to feel like they're involved, and they want to make those social connections with somebody else. So I think that was really key to what works well in an event. And then some of the other things I saw that I participated in were things that were like novelty, right? So MPI, which is one of our industry associations, has an event each year called GMID, or Global Meeting Industry Day. And normally we would all gather in person together. And instead they tried to set a world record. And so they had the Guinness Book of World Records come out to their virtual event. And so those kinds of things where people feel like they could be a part of something really big still helped with that connection piece that brought people together.
Yeah, that was great about virtual shows. You can have people everywhere. The stand of the event is great. You can have people from different countries and no more limits. And now, what is the current state of the event industry? How much longer do you think we were having virtual events? Are they here to stay? Are we moving to hybrid formats?
Okay, so simply put, yes. Yes, virtual events are here to stay. Yes, hybrid events are here to stay. But where are we today? In Toronto, we are now in stage 3 of reopening. So we still have some jurisdictional and municipal restrictions put on us in terms of the number of people that we can have gather outdoors or indoors. But simply put, people want to get together. People want to go outside of their homes. They want to socialize. They want to see their friends and their family again. And so events are coming back. I had posted probably just last Monday on my LinkedIn about how excited I was to see that people are hiring again, that people are going out to have dinner, people are going to events, and I'm seeing my friends and colleagues who are still running large events are starting to run those events again. One of the events that I worked on for a good part of my career for almost 12 years was the Toronto FC and the BMO Field. And so I worked with Maple Leaf Sports and we ran soccer games. And so they had a real soccer game with real fans this past weekend. And that was really, really exciting to see. But are virtual events and hybrid events here to stay? Absolutely. There's a lot of advantages to hybrid and virtual events. And so some form of those, I think, will always be around now. Like I said earlier, they were in existence prior to COVID, maybe not as popular, but they existed before COVID, right? And so I think it depends on what sector of the industry we're talking about. I think you're going to see a lot of virtual and hybrid events that will be here for corporate events or training type events. But in terms of social events, you know, your sporting events, your festivals, your concerts, even your social leisures, your birthday parties, your weddings, that's all going to come back in person, right? And, you know, how are things changing? Well, if you're in Toronto, and I assume many of you are probably tuning in from somewhere in Canada, mostly maybe in Ontario, you know, we have restrictions still. So we still have, you know, mask wearing, social distancing. That's probably not going to disappear anytime soon. As an event planner, you now need to wear a new hat, and you are partly an epidemiologist. You have to kind of start understanding, you know, what is public health? What is sanitization? You have to learn all these new terminologies of, you know, disease and infection and contact tracing that we never really had to worry about as much as we do today. And so I think as things change, and they're changing, gosh, every week right now, you know, follow your government guidelines or your municipal guidelines wherever you are. The first thing I think will leave us is the physical distancing. I think physical distancing is difficult. People want to get closer together, and physical distancing is very difficult in events, because if you're having a physical event on site at a venue, then you are probably making your money based on the number of people that can fit in your venue. And so your profit margin is cut significantly when you have to physically distance people and limit the capacity of your event. So I think physical distancing will be one of those things that is the first to disappear. I know, speaking from the college perspective where I work right now, that is definitely the first thing that's going to leave us. But mask wearing will still be there for a long time to come. So much so that in the news, even today, this morning, when I tuned into the news, the US and the Center for Disease Control had originally said, if you're vaccinated with 2 doses, you don't have to wear a mask inside. And this morning, when I turned on the news, the Center for Disease Control actually said, we take that back. We don't mean that anymore. And they're recommending that if you are indoors, that you should be wearing a mask, even if you have 2 doses of the vaccine, because they're realizing in areas such as St. Louis and Los Angeles that there is a spike or an increase in COVID cases because people have chosen to go maskless. So I think mask will definitely be here for a long time. If you were in parts of Asia or even parts of Canada back in, I guess, what is that, 2009, 2010, when we had SARS, that was commonplace to wear a mask, and that lasted a long time. So people wear a mask to protect themselves, but also to protect those around them. So that's going to stay. I think things like hand sanitization will stay. You know, for now, you're still doing a lot of health checks, a lot of temperature checks. That may, again, be some of the ones after physical distancing that will be lessened as we progress and move forward.
Yeah, even though people are craving to be together again, we are not there, right? So yeah, so safety is the word for now. Right? And
be cautious. Be cautious. I think it is the most important part of this. We don't want to move too quickly. Moving too quickly and taking away too many of those precautions too soon is going to end us up in a 4th wave. And we really, as a society, as an industry, probably cannot sustain a 4th wave. And so, you know, slow and steady wins the race today.
It's really difficult to plan because everything can change as you give an example. So, and so I talking again about the virtual shows, how difficult it is to create a great storytelling for a virtual event, or to keep people's attention, because it's so hard holding people's attention online. You can easily check your phone, you can add other stuff. So do you have any examples or tips for us?
I have some great examples probably. And, you know, as I said earlier, connection is key. People need to feel like they're involved. So things like using a different platform, which, you know, I have some pictures that I want to show in a little bit. Something that's not normally something that they use. So for example, if you're working, you're probably suffering from Zoom fatigue, right? You probably go onto a computer every day at work, you're on a Zoom call. It's very easy to be like, it's just another Zoom. I'm going to check my phone. I'm going to make my lunch. I'm going to do something else, right? So people want to see a platform that's probably a little bit different, that catches their attention, right? But interaction is that key. People don't want to be talked to, right? And so this is kind of nice because we're having an interview, we're having a conversation, and I'm hoping, and I invite everyone who's here today to, you know, get on the chat and start talking to each other as well and leaving questions or comments. But people want to feel like they're part of something and they're part of the conversation. Somebody recently I was having a conversation with made it very, they had a great story. They had a great story of how to explain this. And they said, you know, we're so used to online, you know, double clicking a like or a heart, right? And that is very much the same as going to a conversation in a room with somebody and just sitting there going, oh yeah. It's not very much of a conversation. It's kind of boring. You're not, you know, entertaining anybody. You're not, you know, showing your opinion or anything like that. But when you make the scenario, whatever it is, your event, engaging, where people have to vote for something that they like, or they have to type in an answer then that gets them involved. That's like going to a party and having a conversation where I say something, you say something, somebody else comes into the conversation, right? So that connection piece is just so, so important.
So do you think gamification or any other type of experience can also help?
It depends on your audience. I think it really depends on what it is you're doing, the type of audience. Is this a business clientele? Is this a social clientele? But yes, gamification works. The ability to share with other platforms. So if somebody's able to share that on their personal social media sites, things like that, that are really engaging. From a business perspective, if there is something that they can take away from your event and put on their resume, or something that they can take away from their event and share on their LinkedIn to say, I went to this event and I learned X, or I achieved this certification, that's really valuable. It's that value add that people are looking for. The thing about virtual or even hybrid events today is there are millions of them. If you go online and you Google virtual event and whatever it is you're interested in, they'll just keep popping up and up and up. And so you are fighting for the same audience as, you know, a dozen other events and a dozen other event planners. And so you need to have something in your event that is different, that is a value add to that person who's attending, for them to choose your event over somebody else's event.
Yeah, it's really hard to compete, and especially there is a limit what you can do to make your event unique. You can certainly send some kits for the people, ask them to open only during the event. But yeah, so probably you have some good examples to share with us. Do you want to share right now?
I would love to. One of the things I think is really fun right now is the ability to try and connect people, not just on the screen, but with something tangible that they can hold in their hands. And so I'm going to flip over here. Give me just a second to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So, you know, in that same breath of, you know, people want to feel connected, people also love free gifts. People love things that they can touch, that are tangible, that they can keep, memories or mementos. And people love things that they can post on social media. And so this is actually something I pulled right off the internet, of somebody who was going to a virtual summit. And when they registered for the virtual summit, they still needed to provide their credentials and their information, so their address, and they get something sent to them. And so here you can see an example of a kit that was sent to somebody's home in preparation for their time or their participation at this particular virtual summit. You know, there's information about the summit. You know, there's some goodies there. I see a bottle of champagne and a wine tumbler. There's a roll of toilet paper, so they're poking a little bit of fun at COVID and the paper shortage that we had very early on. And then there's a couple of other items. And so these could just be regular items that you know, are gifts that you would get when you go to an event anyways, or they could be items that could be used at a very certain time during the event. And that's always a lot of fun as well, right? You want to also find ways to keep your guests or your attendees talking after your event, right? If you're talking about particularly creating an event that is repetitive, so it's going to happen again maybe in a month or in 6 months or in a year, you want people to keep talking and to be excited about your event. So you want to have that ability to have something really unique that they can share that will keep the buzz going, if you will, after your event is over. I'm going to hold off on, I'm going to hold off on this one. This one here is something I talked about a little bit earlier on as well, in terms of what captures somebody's attention. And I said, Zoom doesn't really do it because people are so used to being on Zoom basically all the time, especially if they're working or if they're in school. And so, if you can find a event platform, and there's tons of different platforms out there right now. Eventbrite has a platform, Cvent has a platform, Eventi has a platform, Wova has a platform. There's so many different platforms that you can hire now to create a very distinct virtual space for your event. I just pulled this picture off. This is a picture that was shared to me by one of my colleagues at the college, and it's a educational conference that he went to. And you'll notice in this on his screen then is this like whole city of places that he can go in order to walk around virtually in the event and go to different areas. And so you can see there's a lounge where he can have social conversation with other educators that were attending this conference. He could go to the presentation area to log into live presentations with their speakers. He could go over to the exhibits to meet other vendors who were selling products or services for this particular event. And then there was like the resources or the takeaways. And so we had this conversation when he shared this with me that this was engaging. It was exciting because it was different. It was something else to look at that wasn't just a bunch of Zoom boxes. And the fact that it kind of felt like you were physically at an event because you had to maneuver or click your way through from one area to the next. So that's one way of engaging or keeping people talking about your event. Now, I want to show you this last one before I stop sharing my screen for a minute. This here is done in virtual reality. And so this is another educational conference. It's actually, I wasn't planning on showing you that many educational conferences. It just happened to be what I had on hand. But this one's actually done in virtual reality. So if you were tuning in from a computer, it would look flat or 2D like we are seeing it right now in this image. But if you had a virtual reality headset at home, and then you could actually participate as a 3D character. You could be one of these avatars that's in the picture, and you could physically maneuver around the room and meet other avatars. I had an opportunity to work on an event like this a few years back, and it's actually really, really neat. It definitely keeps people talking because very few people have become a virtual reality 3D avatar. And so you get to go in and create an avatar that looks just like you. And once you're in there and you put your headset on, you would physically need to walk around the room of your home in order to walk around the room inside this virtual space. And what's really neat about it is if you use a really good software platform such as Alt VR or Alt Space VR or Roomy, this is Roomy that you're looking at right now, it sounds very realistic too. Not only does it look really realistic with your sponsors' names up on the walls and the presentation slides up on the wall, but it sounds very realistic. So if I wanted to walk to the front of the room, the voice of the speaker would get louder, presuming that the speaker was on the stage. But if I walked to the back of the room and wanted to have a conversation with one of the other avatars, we could have a conversation and that person would be clear to me, but the background noise, if you will, in the rest of the room would lower so that it sounded like real background noise as if you were in a real room. So those, I think, were some really neat options that are different, that keep people talking for the time being.
Pretty cool examples. I really like the 3D, the virtual reality. I have a Facebook Oculus, and I absolutely love, and I can't wait for everybody to have access. I can imagine if everybody could have one Oculus at home, we could make more virtual reality events, and I was watching movies with my brother. My brother is in Brazil, and we were in the same room watching films all the time because I had the Oculus with me. And yeah, I really like the box too. And talking again about hybrid events, it's not that simple. In a hybrid event, you just have a in-person event, and you just put a camera and broadcast. It doesn't work, right? So I imagine that you have to have two types of events, right? One with a content specific for your online audience, and another one for the in-person. So you have to pretty much roast two events and have a large budget for both events. So because the major expense on the event is for venue that you don't have when you're hosting online. But if you are doing two events, you're gonna spend money on hotel, catering, venue, and technology on the top. And virtual technology could be really expensive too. So should we host two separate events in this case? What do you suggest?
So if you're going to do the hybrid, and there is a lot of advantages to hybrid, the ability to connect with people around the world, to be able to bring your speakers in without having to pay for hotels and accommodations and flights and catering and all that, to reach a wider audience. And I think you're right. It's not as simple as putting a camera there. People, again, need to feel like they're in an event that was catered or created specifically for them. And so you do need to have that kind of secondary section. Maybe it's just a specific MC or speaker who is, connecting with them in between live sessions, that kind of thing that needs to happen. I think what's important is to look at where your budget is best suited, right? And so a lot of people try and save money. They say, like, I'll use Zoom because I can do it for free, or I'll use MS Teams because my business has an account. But these are not the most secure platforms that we have. So things like Zoom bombing or hacking can happen. Technologically, things fail. And so I would suggest that if you're going to go the route of fully virtual or even hybrid, is look at who you hire. Where do you spend your money? And right now, a lot of audiovisual companies are pivoting to virtual and hybrid events. And so they are really becoming the specialist in what platforms work. What kind of internet bandwidth do you need? What kind of electrical needs do you have? What do we do if we lose power or we lose that connection or that live stream? They are the ones who are going to deal with all that IT stuff, all that, technological stuff that really is not my specialty as an event planner. And so I would rather spend my money making sure that I have a really good, strong AV production company that is well versed in hybrid and virtual events, plus a event platform like an Eventbrite, a Cvent, and put my money into that, because that's what's going to matter so that I have a successful event. I can do this for a lot cheaper using a free platform, but when it breaks, my reputation is at stake.
I totally agree. It's not that simple, right? We need to, it's not like, oh, you're saving tons of money on virtual. Not exactly, could be very expensive having a good partner to work with. And so virtual events give us an opportunity to collect a lot of data, right? So talking now about metrics, we can have access to a lot of leading generation. We can have pretty much online sales. I'm doing a trade show, a virtual trade show starting in August. For 6 weeks, I will be able to see the virtual booth, how many people are visiting, what they are clicking and what they are buying. So what types of metrics, new metrics do we have? I know about ROI, That's a new one, ROI of attention. There is any other types of metrics that we keep an eye or KPIs?
Yeah, I mean, here's the greatest thing about metrics, right? Metrics were really hard to obtain when we were doing live events, especially if you were working in festivals or public events where they were free or they had no boundaries. So like street festival, that type of thing, you would have a very difficult time estimating the number of people who came versus the number of people who you advertised to. Very difficult trying to figure out how much money somebody spent. But now that we're online, we have all the metrics in the world. We can tell you what time, where in the world, what did they click on, how long they spent looking at it, who they shared it with, what they bought, what they liked, what they didn't like. It's all there. And the reviews are so much faster too, right? So if you did something really great, people are going to share that very quickly. You did something really not so great. Again, people are, keyboard warriors. They're going to be on their keyboards typing away that they didn't enjoy a particular aspect of your virtual event, right? So you've got all the metrics in the world. The challenging part is understanding your metrics, right? So if you don't have a great understanding of what those metrics are, I would highly encourage you to find somebody on your team or to reach out to somebody who has a better understanding of what those metrics are. But it's also, how are you going to use those metrics and apply them? And so one of the challenges that we have in virtual and hybrid events right now is, how do we get our stuff out on the internet? It's not as simple as just putting up your website. There's a lot of SEO there that has to be done. The algorithms for what is popular on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc., changes daily. And so you're learning what those algorithms are in order to ensure that your messaging, your marketing is getting to people, the right people at the right time.
And unfortunately, we have less than a minute. Oh, it was so good. The time flew. I had so many questions. But okay, we were able to. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. Thank you, Shannon, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.